Look, GB1, I found my board, which means we can finally go to the beach room. It's just a few corridors over. Let's go. What do you mean you don't want to walk to the beach room? It's just right over there. Okay, well, I understand. Part of the fun is getting there, GB1, and our friends over at Time for Machines sent us a really awesome dream van to check out. Maybe we can build that and take the scenic route. Sounds like a plan. Hey everyone, and welcome to Groove Builders, the show where we create together. I'm your host, Disorderly Cone, and this is my friend GB1. In this episode, we're going to be taking a look at the Time for Machine Dream Van, and this is our first look at the Time for Machine wooden models. Now, we've built some other wooden models on the show, and some of them even move, but the Time for Machine one is a little bit different. It has 3D printed parts. How well will this model work? How well it will all go together? And will it actually do the thing it says it's supposed to do? These are all great questions, Groovers, and you better believe we're gonna have the answers. Let's get down to the workbench and take a look at our package. And boom! There we have it! All of our pages needed to build the Time for Machine Dream Van. I know this looks like a lot of instructions, but that's because Time for Machine really likes to spread things out to make it easier on us. The first thing we're going to take a look at is how to build our wheels and some of the outer details. Next, we'll talk about our 3D printed parts and how to get all our gears lined up properly. And finally, we'll talk about putting everything together and of course, giving it the big test. Groovers, I'm excited to get started on this project, but I can see a lot of new builders out in the audience. Let's go over the basics. These wooden models require us to pop out our pieces and then sand them using this yellow sandpaper. Once we have our parts correctly smoothed out, we can start to push them together by pressure fitting them. Some of our parts will require wax, and that's because the pieces need to be able to freely move against each other. Creating the most frictionless environment as possible for these wooden models is the key to getting all of the components to work correctly. Lastly, if you're choosing to paint these models, it's important to remember that some of the paint can act as a stop for some of our movements. Always make sure to put a little bit of extra wax on these parts, just so everything works correctly. I think it's best to stay away from polka dots, GB1. It's not really your color. Now, what tools do we need to build the Dream Van? That's a good question. Let's ask our tool expert. Timothy?
You're going to the beach and you didn't invite me?
I'm sorry, buddy. I didn't realize that you wanted to go to the beach. Do you want to go?
Well, now that I have been asked, I will think about it. The Time for Machine Dream Van is a model that comes with everything you need to build it, including the sandpaper, wax, and pop-out tool. I've decided I will go, but only if there's sherbet.
Thanks, Timothy. Who knew the Daleks like beaches? Anyway, as always, these are just our suggestions, and you really don't need anything but sandpaper and wax to complete these models. But of course, having the right tools will make everything a lot easier for you. Alright, now we've looked at our instructions and we have all our tools. There's only one thing left for you to do, and that's to press the like and subscribe button. We're currently trying to get to 4,000 subscribers, and I could really use your help. No pressure though. I might have cleared a place inside of the Dream Van for you, but you know, I'm not going to say that yet. Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. We got all kinds of really cool projects. I'm so glad you're going to be there with me. All right, let's get down to the workbench and begin our build. The Time for Machine Dream Van is a unique twist on the wooden model genre. With its easy-to-follow steps and fusion between wood and PLA, it leaves us with a fantastic model worthy to show our friends. But like all kits, there are a few things you want to know. Let's get started with our wheels. After popping our pieces out, we need to make sure everything is nice and smooth. I understand sanding is rather boring. In the interest of time, I won't be showing much sanding on the actual show here, but believe me, it has been done. Our blue wheels are for the most part pressure fitted on. If you look closely on the inside of our rubber, you can see a small groove where the wood needs to go. Don't overdo it here, people. Just a little bit of pressure will be more than enough to fit the wheel on. And that can pretty much be said for most of our detail when it comes to our Dream Van.
Most, if not all the parts, have a stop that helps you kind of know when you're just at the right amount of tightness. By comparing our different parts to the pictures in the instructions, we can see exactly where everything needs to go and how to put it in the right place. Sometimes you might need to sand the parts right on the thin bits to make sure the piece actually gets to the right spot. Just make sure to match these pieces up multiple times. That way when you've sanded enough off, you'll know when to stop. Having these pieces wiggly is the opposite of what we want. A stiff connection is the best way to make sure everything works correctly. Let's take a look at our front, for instance. Here, we're going to be putting the front frame together. You might find that some of the supports don't necessarily fit in their holes. The first thing you need to do is make sure you're putting it in the right spot. I didn't do that. Next, we need to sand just a little bit off the tip, and boom! Looking good, looking good. Keep in mind, we don't want to sand the little pegs on the front, however, because that's where our flexible wood piece will be going, and we want to make sure it's held in place correctly. Only sand here if you absolutely need to, and if you're having a hard time getting that flexible wood in place, I suggest putting a little bit of wax on the corners. This will help it slide into place. One other part I want to talk about is part 41. It's a gear that we need to slide into place on part 40. You may need to wax and sand part 40 to get part 41 in the right place, just behind that catch. It's a total pain in the butt. Just remember we are dealing with wood here. And if we match the pieces up multiple times, and of course sand off just a little bit each time with a little bit of wax, we'll be able to slide this right over the catch and into place. Yes, it may take a little bit of time, but patience will pay off. Let's move on to our 3D printed parts. These are cool and very springy. I love the idea of using these to drive the van. It's a better system than the rubber bands, that's for sure, and installing them correctly is the key to getting a great result. For this to work out correctly, we need our gear assembly, 3D printed gears, parts 14 and 15. The first thing we need to do is look at our 3D printed parts and ensure they're problem free. Next, I'll sand down all of our gears and of course give them a good coat of wax. Then comes the fitting. Take special care here to follow the diagram. I inserted part 14, then the printed gear, 15, and then the last printed gear, and made sure everything was in the proper orientation. Fitting everything on here was kind of hard. Because this area has the most tension on it, we don't want to take away too much of the wood. We need to sand just enough of the wood away where the gear will fit into place without taking away too much of the structural integrity. Again, matching our parts up multiple times is a great way to make sure this is safely done. It's just a little bit slow. Our 3D printed parts should be pushed into place by their base, so you don't accidentally break the spring. With a little bit of luck, pushy pushy, boom! All good to go. Let's move on to lining all these gears up. This is super important, and most likely why you might be here. Starting on page 20, we need to line up our gear assembly we just made with gear 41. Gear 42 will act as a stop, so making sure all of our parts here are well sanded and waxed is the key to getting a smooth movement on starting and stopping. I can't stress this enough. Get all the burrs out of the gears and really put some wax on them. After, we need to move on to page 26. This is the last gear we add in place, but it's also a great page to see how all of our gears are supposed to look. Do your gears look exactly the same? Are they all sanded and waxed? All right, we are all ready to move on to putting it all together. Just like any model, when it comes to putting our assemblies together, we need to be very careful not to break any of our pieces. Most of our parts are pressure fitted, so it's actually a lot easier than you might think. Let's make sure to really check all of our connections, especially the ones around the roof and window areas. There are these little locks everywhere, and getting them to click is a good sign that the part is all the way in. That being said, you might not always hear that click, so it's still a good idea to double check the part and to make sure that everything is in the right spot, to the best of its ability. If you're having trouble putting some of your connections together, a little bit of wax might help, but it shouldn't be necessary. With our roof rack installed, we can put the surfboard on top, and now it's time to give this guy a test.
there we have it, the Time for Machine Dream Van. This build was a lot of fun to put together, and relatively easy too, which I was quite surprised by. Besides having to make sure all of our gears are lined up and of course our springs are facing the right way, this whole thing kind of almost put itself together. I think Time for Machine did a fantastic job with their instructions, kind of breaking it down to 1 or 2 pieces per page, which makes it really hard to get lost. That being said though, you still have to pay attention to those little details, especially when it comes to like our drive shafts, where you might need to sand things down a little bit to get all the pieces together. But I digress. One thing I do want to mention is our key here. You're supposed to put this into the side of the Dream Van and then crank it up to get to the proper torque before letting it go. While you can do this, I feel it like it's very weak and almost like I'm going to break the gears if I use it. So what I've been doing is taking the bottom here, pushing the stop, and then just kind of cranking it back like one of those old school crank toys. And then when I'm happy with the amount of pressure that's kind of built up with these springs here, I can then press the start button up here on the top, and this thing will rock and roll. I find this a lot easier to be able to show people and demonstrate how this actually works, and I recommend you do it too. One thing I would like to do is add color to this, but I've been really debating on what color it should be, especially with these blue wheels. You can't do that traditional red color. I mean, you could, but you know, it might look a little bit weird. So maybe in the future, I'll post another video about how to actually paint it. If you're new to the whole wooden model community, I would really recommend picking this one up first. It really does have a great blend of everything you're going to need to know for future builds, and it's pretty easy to put together. And with the amount of support online coming from the community, there's a lot of people on there that if you do run into issues, you'll be able to communicate with and, well, figure it out. If you're an experienced builder, this is also one you want to put into your collection because let's face it, it really does look cool. And with these 3D printed parts in the back, it does add something to this build that you really don't see too often. And with that, Groovers, we're at the end of our show. I had a really good time building the Time for Machine Dream Van with you, and if you guys had a good time, don't forget to press that like button. For more videos like this, hit subscribe as well, as we have all kinds of really awesome builds coming out in the future. Want to check out some really cool builds you could do yourself? Check out groupbuilders.ca. We have all kinds of models on there at great prices with fast shipping to the United States and Canada. Who knows, you might even find your new hobby on there. Until next time, Groovers, keep building. All right, GB1, I'm ready for the beach, and I got the van this time.